about to drop some knowledge, hopefully, and encourage a lot of questions. So, part of schoolwork is you either enter into research one of many ways or all these ways. Oops, we may have some more guests with us. Good morning. I'm going to try to sneak in the back, but hey, you're welcome. So, when you're a student, you are either reading research, you might do research, or you might be a research subject. A lot of programs, especially at universities like psychology programs, have almost a requirement to be a research subject. Learning about the education process that comes from hopefully research. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Investigations, it's kind of a large, broad topic. When someone says to you, I'm doing an investigation, well, is that just talking with a bunch of folks, or is it a rigorous, systematic, designed, methodologically appropriate attempt to answer questions? Then we've got the term research. Well, there's a dictionary definition of research, and there's the IRB definition of research. So we throw out these topics all the time, and I'm not sure that anyone even knows that we're all talking on the same page. So I want to talk to you very specifically today about scientific research that is what we call human subject research. So I live in a world that is entirely dictated by policy, federal law, state law, local context, and so we have these very niche definitions and working understandings of what even simple words like human, maybe not simple, human and research. So we're going to spend some time talking about that today. Keeping in mind that in my world of being IRB, HRPP, we only deal with human subject research. There's lots of research that has animals. We're fancy animals, but I don't look at that. Lab-based research, where you have technology, probably not human subjects, but sometimes there is a human subject involved. Then you have things that are like data analysis, and you're like, that's just numbers. Well, it actually might be humans, but I'll tell you why when we get to that definition. Remember, I live in a very niche world where you just can't assume that everyone knows that we're talking about the same thing. So we're going to talk about human subject research today. Before we even start that, I want to talk to you about, I'm sure in your travels through school you've talked about scientific method, because this is part of what that definition of research is that we live in our regulatory world. So scientific method always has these essential procedures that you make an observation, you have an idea, a thought about something, and there's a problem, there's a question that you want to answer. So you develop a hypothesis or a set of hypotheses, and you ask a specific question. Then you test your hypothesis, and you gather the data about it. So you design something to answer a question. Maybe it's qualitative, maybe it's quantitative, maybe it's very we call it like, I don't want to say soft, but just sort of throwing it out in the universe, just seeing what you get back, or maybe you just want very rigid yes or no answers, or number 3, or blue, or applesauce, whatever the thing is. And then you analyze the results. Again, you're testing something to see whether your idea about what something was true or not proving what you already thought you know. right? And then if you get the answer that you didn't expect, you have to reformulate, well, why didn't I get the answer that I was expecting? Which is very interesting. It can become like a rabbit hole. You're like, ooh, I don't really know. I thought I knew why the sky was blue, but it really wasn't that. Now I have to design a whole other project. Rinse, wash, repeat. This is what science is, a scientific method. Okay, and everybody follows this. If you're doing scientific investigations and using a scientific methodology, we're all kind of doing the same thing. So you have precepts that we're all hopefully operating under there. Your results and your methodology are verifiable. We were just talking about this yesterday, a few years ago, I can't remember exactly when, some scientists, PhDs and everything, said, hey, we invented cold fusion. We can prove that we have cold fusion. It's a revolutionary energy source. And then they're like, great, this is going to change the world. And then, hey, let's go try to do it. Hey, I don't think I can do what you're doing. So you kind of wonder, like, did you make it up? Did you do something that I don't understand? Did you have a fluky thing that can't be reproduced? Kind of got to wonder about some of these things. Predictability, falsifiability, and fairness in the conduct of your methodology. These are all things that we have to say, like, if we're going to be rigorous, let's all do it the same way and under the same operating premises, okay? But more importantly, one could argue, is that when we do research, that we're doing it ethically. So what is ethics? People toss around terms like morality or doing the right thing, or anyone else have any ideas like ethics, philosophy, culture, things like that. But there's sort of a dictionary definition. And it's a discipline dealing with what is good or bad, or a moral duty, or a code of what people think is right or wrong. It's a context where a group conducts or acts or behaves in a certain way. And there's sort of a collective consciousness about why we feel that things are, let's use the terms that are very loaded, right or wrong. You can literally spend your entire life trying to understand what's right and wrong. At some point in the world, we thought that the world was flat. We were sure of that. There are still people who believe that. Are they right or wrong? Flat Earth thing, I don't mean to offend anyone, but there was a conference recently and there was a meme that went up because they had one of their placards at their Flat Earth convention actually said, meet flat earthers from all over the globe. I was like, okay. How come when you fly west, you don't just keep going for infinity, you end up back where you started? But anyway, science, that's why. So when we talk about research, we're always talking about scientific method, and we're always, hopefully, somewhere in the forefront, or at least in the back front, talking about ethics, okay? This is the world that we live in. This is the world that the IRB lives in. Why? Because research that is conducted within ethical boundaries and sound scientific principles and practices helps to provide public assurance that the rights and safety and well-being of the subjects are protected, ensure that the data that's being collected is credible. It's accurate, credible, reproducible, and it contributes, your whole investigation in some way, directly or indirectly, contributes to the betterment of society and the world. We can all think of examples of, in just generic kind of talk show kind of things, where people don't trust research for any number of reasons. Well, there's some bad research out there. You're just naturally suspicious of things. People have had very bad experiences personally, culturally, historically with research, all in the name of science, as if that was going to fix everything. Well, I'm a scientist. I'm doing the right thing. We have to be very conscious of that. So everything that the IRB does, and everything that when you're doing research, you have to keep these things in mind. Are you being rigorous, and are you being ethical? Okay. Without these protections in place, we know things can go very, very wrong very quickly. We want to believe that people are good and well-intentioned, but things can happen. So I don't want to scare anyone or things, but I'm pretty sure most people have heard of some of the experimentation that went on during World War II with the Nazi, they were scientists. We have legit doctors, physicists, social scientists, but things went wrong. So I'm going to just throw some of these topics up here, and just on their own, inducing freezing or hypothermia in people. Well, is that good science or ethical? It could be both. It could be both. We know that, for example, fighter pilots were going up at very high altitudes. It's cold up there, right? Or had to serve out in the woods in the winter. So they were dying of hypothermia. And there's real biological effects of hypothermia. So wouldn't you as a scientist want to know how to protect people, understand the mechanisms, that you can do those things. Just the concept of testing hypothermia isn't good or bad. But what if you were purposely freezing people to see what the effects were? And those people could not say no to being frozen or stop at any point in that process. And that there was nothing done that mitigated their experience in their sensation or the fear or the psychological, either physical or the psychological experience of being a research subject. And what if some of the questions they were even asking at all weren't even valid? They just wanted to see how much pain you can induce in someone, just for the sheer fun of it. So the topic itself doesn't make it good or bad science, and the topic itself doesn't make it ethical or not ethical. It's the context, right? Again, high altitude effects, genetic alteration and testing, pharmaceutical inventions. We have an entire industry of things that we test drugs on people. Yeah, we have to because people use them, right? It doesn't make it good or bad in and of itself. It's the context, it's the ethics, it's the scientific design. All right? So just sort of think about that. Then maybe some people have heard of the Tuskegee experiments without getting into too much detail. You can do an entire class on this. Syphilis is and was a very important health problem. And so there was a very large-scale project that was initiated in Tuskegee with a group of 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, and 200 who did not have the disease. And basically what they wanted to do, without getting into all the details, they wanted to watch the disease progression of this catastrophic disease in this population. But they weren't actually treating people. In the very, very beginning, there wasn't even really a treatment for syphilis that we would think of today. Today you take antibiotics, but back in the day, there was nothing. Since the beginning of time, there was nothing. There was actually a mercury-based, or I believe it was cyanide-based treatment. So you could actually give people a poison, and something like 30% of them survived, but who knows why. But it was the best treatment that you could offer people. But at some point, penicillin was invented. They withheld penicillin even though they knew that it could treat syphilis. So maybe at the beginning, the project might have had some semblance of scientific merit and ethics, but really, this project went on. It was supposed to be 6 months long. It went on for 40 years. And they watched these men progress through a devastating physical, mental, and social decline. Don't forget, all these people had families. So even though that these men were in a community, they were not isolated. They had wives and children while having syphilis and never being treated. So this went on for 40 years, and this went on through levels of every part of government, health departments, heads of major parts of the federal government, local government. Everyone knew that things were wrong, and not too many people spoke up for 40 years. Eventually, in the 70s, they kind of fessed up, only after a very rigorous campaign, I believe, in the Washington Post. I can't remember exactly what newspaper it was, but sort of pushed this to the forefront of people's minds. So it wasn't, again, until the last widow, was 2009. So you're talking about something in the 30s to 2009 going on. Because ethics, because lack of science. Okay. Has anyone ever heard of Willowbrook? Also another famous example. Where we really need to know, and there was a medical need to understand what the causes and treatments could be for hepatitis. So you had a group of mentally and physically disabled children and adults living in an institution. And it's a real health concern there. So you do want to treat them, but the way that they did the research, basically they were giving people the disease on purpose. what? And these are people who physically and mentally cannot consent, did not know what was going on, weren't even being treated just regularly in their day-to-day life, being treated well. Can you imagine the horrors? Imagine having a child in an institution where this is happening. Again, really good idea. We need to know what hepatitis is. We need to know how to help people who have hepatitis. We need to have diseases that can be treated. But this went on for 15 years. And you're talking about kids as young as 3 years old. Eventually, as you can see, the research involved dividing students up into groups. Some that were given protective antibodies. They knew that there were some things that were a treatment or prevention. Some kids were given it, some kids were not. Can you imagine finding out that either your child, your loved one, or yourself, that you were in that group? You didn't even know that this was happening. Or could you say, no, I don't want to be part of that? Okay. Eventually, we did come up with vaccines for Hep A and Hep B, which we all have the benefit of. But think of the context of how we got there. That Machiavellian, the ends justifying the means. Not principle, I'm not going to not get the Hep B vaccine, but I think about it, And then also, just let's not put this in historical, like that happened back then where we didn't know any better. Or it happened really far away to the people I've never met, or we'll say those people. Right in our own backyard, and not to out Penn, but Penn is a famous example of when things go wrong. Has anyone ever heard of this case? It's such a big case that in my IRB book, my textbook that like everyone in the industry uses, it's the introduction from the father of this young man, Jesse Gelsinger, who died because of participation in a scientific clinical trial, a medical clinical trial. So he had a very rare disease, which was somewhat manageable. It basically means that you can't break down proteins in the same way. You build up ammonia in your body. So it's somewhat manageable, and he had, because of his genetic background, he has a mild version of it. So he was basically on a very special diet and with medications, he was able to survive. Most people don't survive on this, but he was able to survive. And he started participation in a clinical trial at Penn, just literally down the road. And he was injected with a specific treatment, something that had been developed over the course of time, and he died 4 days later at the age of 18. Okay, so we know that people can die in clinical trials. We know that they can die because of the treatment. We also know that people can die in clinical trials because they are gravely ill themselves. We have people in cancer trials, think about that. People who are literally already on death's door that sign up for clinical trials as a last hope, or they know that they're not even going to survive, but it's the only time that we can test things. So think of that. But this is an 18-year-old kid, right? So it's outrage, Not so much that he died, because that can happen, but think about why. In this case, the doctor, who is still working, not to out him and pick on him, just this is a cautionary tale, and there but for the grace, we could all be here. He actually had put Jesse as a substitute for another volunteer who had dropped out, even though he actually should not have been in the study, because studies have exclusion and inclusion criteria. Ignored it. Shove this guy in, doesn't need to be in the study, okay? They were giving these therapies in cohorts or groups staggered, but they didn't report that other people who had already gotten this had very, very serious side effects that they didn't know about, didn't tell anyone. We have a clinical phase where we're testing on people, but in the preclinical, which is working on either in test tubes or in animals, the deaths in the monkeys that were being tested did not tell people that in the informed consent. So you can give people information and say, look, here are the risks. This thing happened. I'm sharing this with you so that I can give you information about whether you or your loved one wants to be in the study. You can freely decide to, hear this information and say yes or no, or stop even after you say yes. None of this was done. So lots of other problems that happened, but this kid died needlessly from the research participation. So, from tragedy comes rule and law, and why we have what I do now, IRBs. So from the tragedies from back then and even now, we're constantly changing the regulations and the rules and the oversight so that things like this don't happen. Has anyone ever heard of the Milgram Experiment? What's that? It's a big one. So, long time ago, back in the 50s, there was a social scientist, I believe at Harvard, who actually designed a shock experiment. Have you ever heard of anything like this? Ringing a bell? Or, to make a long story short, people thought they were shocking other people in a room. And he was basically testing to see how much you could get people to do when you had someone in a white coat standing in a room saying, well, this is science. You got to do this, we can continue the experiment. And people thought that they were actually shocking people, painfully shocking people. They couldn't see them, but they could hear them. And people were not actually being shocked. The person who was actually being shocked was actually a Confederate, was someone part of the team. But the people in the research project, who were actually ones being studied, the ones that they thought that they were shocking people, were traumatized. Because they actually thought, my God, I can hurt people, or I like hurting people. Think about that. So they had to be debriefed afterwards, and even the debriefing itself can have an effect. So I don't want people to think that, oh, well, I'm not doing biomedical research, therefore I'm not hurting anybody. Or I couldn't hurt anyone, or I can't cause harm. You can't, because again, science and ethics are always part of, no, that's not to say that we shouldn't have experiments that are uncomfortable or risky. We do, but we have to put parameters and protections around them. Hence my job. Okay, and your job. So thinking about, like, since the beginning of time, we have codes and rules and laws that come from back in far as World War II, where after the Nazi experimentation and subsequent roundup and attempted punishment at some of the Nazi perpetrators, we had the Nuremberg trials in Helsinki. I get that wrong, but they established a Nuremberg Code. And then that kind of progressed later, a little bit later, in the 1960s, in an international agreement about medical research, Declaration of Helsinki, 1964. And the Belmont Report here in the United States, because let's not pretend that, we're going to point the finger and look at those bad Germans or those things. We were doing stuff here. There's all kinds of experiments that were happening here. We didn't have something formal until I was already a little kid. That's crazy, right? So in 1974, when this National Research Act was born, or put into effect, is when the IRB sort of came into fruition. So before that, we didn't really have something formal. So we follow these laws. The common federal rule, which is law, it is not, it's rules with the enforcement of law. That's what we work with. So just to sort of go over this, until Nuremberg, remember after and post-World War II, they're introducing concepts of informed consent, which most people just take for granted. That wasn't even a thing. It wasn't codified in any way. That you have to do research with scientific merit. Why is that just coming into play? That you have the risk reduction and qualified personnel and freedom from coercion to either participate or not participate in a project. That the PI can stop and should stop a project if it's going wrong. Or that you already have enough evidence that you don't need to keep going. We stop trials because it's so successful, right? Hey, we found a miracle cure. We're not going to keep testing indefinitely and exposing people to things. We've got enough information. We don't have to keep doing research for the sake of we said we were going to do it. Yeah, you can start for both good and bad reasons. And that subjects can actually stop it or remind you. You can withdraw, right? We have, again, in the 60s, we actually start talking about vulnerable groups and populations, children, people with mental and physical impairment, people that are, imagine saying to someone, hey, you know what? Like in Tuskegee, you make virtually no money, but you live out in rural southern part of America, and you have, you're a sharecropper, or you're working on, or not even employed. We will give you, I'm going to make up a number, $500 if you are in this study. How many people do you think are going to sign up for something? That's coercive, right? Or you can only get all this money if you do everything we ask you, not just part of it. You have to finish everything. Then we're going to give you the money. Makes it difficult, right? It's the same now. Again, Belmont Report, until the 70s, that we actually consider respect for persons, beneficence, that we treat people, where we reduce risk and we encourage for the betterment of society, and that there's justice in how research subjects are recruited and treated. Again, these are late in the game, but here we are. But this is what we do. So the IRB, also called an ethics committee, or sometimes a little bit of a combination, we actually are a group of people, mostly volunteers and then some official staff, that actually apply research ethics to the projects at hand, to make sure that we as a group and as an individual speak up, make sure that we're doing the right thing. Who gives us the authority? Well, the university, because we have to have one. The federal government, because of the common federal rule. Remember, rules are a little bit different than law. Laws are, Congress and legislative bodies make laws. We have rules, but they have the force of law. A little nerdy, that's my world, but we act as though it's law, because it basically is. And international agreements that aren't really law, like the International Conference on Harmonization that mostly deals with biomedical research, but all these players and institutions and different countries in the world have gotten together and said, let's all play on the same field with the same rules. So they're basically how industry standards are met and international standards are met. And our job is to help ensure that human research is carried out in an ethical manner in accordance with all of the international, federal, state, local, and policies of the groups involved and the best practices of the same. So even if you don't have something written down, but you know you should do something, or you know that commonly it's done a certain way, we still follow those things. And the primary concern always is that the safety and the welfare of the subjects. Some people throw in that it's the safety and protection of the institution or the PIs. I kind of leave that out because if you're taking care of the subjects, it means you're doing the right thing for yourself as a researcher and for the institution. So it's happily redundant, okay? So what do we look at? We only look at human research. And that we only look at the definition of things that it's from the federal government, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the FDA where it applies. You guys aren't doing biomedical research. And biomedical and social behavioral, or a combination, because there are factors in both. We don't just walk in and just do one or the other. Sometimes we have to cross over, or we have different groups of people working on the same project. But for you on the street, what do you need to know? You need to know whether your project is human subjects research, and if so, that it needs to come to the IRB. So I want to walk you through this. So the first giant hole that we have to put all this information is this research? And I told you before, there's a special definition of research. Not the definition in the dictionary, but the DHHS definition of research. It means that, and I kind of highlighted some of the key things, and you can read the rules about this. It's a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. Where systematic means it's carried out according to a plan. Investigation means a searching inquiry for ascertaining facts, detailed or careful examination. Why did I put a question mark there? Sorry. And generalizable. That's the one that people really struggle with. Generalizable in our nerdy regulatory world means the knowledge the systematic investigation is designed to develop or contribute can be widely and universally applicable. Anybody in the world can pick up something and think that it's useful to them. I could do a study about my thumb, and I'm like, I really investigated my thumb. It's really interesting to me, but whatever. It's really not generalizable. But someone could pick up my huge book about my thumb, and they're like, cool, I can use this, and I have all kinds of ideas. But I didn't design the project to talk about my thumb. I just wrote a lot about my own thumb. It just got out into the public sphere. So we're always wrestling with, did the person, and we can't see intent, but really, if you're designing a very rigorous system of investigation, we can basically tell whether it's supposed to be generalizable or not. Okay, so these are some of the major features. So first you have to decide whether it's even research according to that definition, and then the next step is it human? This is what I was telling you before. Sometimes numbers on a page or a sample in a lab is considered human. Sounds very strange. How can numbers on a page be human? Because part of research protections is that we think of both your physical tissue or your information about a person where you can know who somebody is or reasonably figure out somebody. I use reasonably very carefully. It's human, it's connected to a human. So you can say, my blood cells, they're definitely from a human, but if you just saw a blood cell on a microscope or a slide, you're not going to know, oh, that's Mary's red blood cell. But you could also know that Mary Smith gave me that blood cell, and I'm going to look at her medical record. So one is just a sample, don't know who it's from. That's not considered human, and know it's from a human. The other one is, I know it's Mary Smith's blood cell, and I can check all over medical records. See the difference? All right, because you want to protect those, and you want, when people offer participation in research, they should know what's happening to the things, the information, the samples. It's called data, either way. You have a right to know about that. So the DHHS definition of human stipulates that the research involved obtaining private and identifiable information or biospecimens, this is new, as of January 19th, 2019, about living individuals. So if you're doing research about dead people, is it human? No, not from DHHS perspective. You have to either interact with people, and that could be online, that could be in person, that could be both, or an intervention. An intervention is you're manipulating their experience somehow on purpose. So if you're just watching people walk down the street today, and they're already going to be walking down the street, you can do research on that. Because, you know, I'm curious when people cross the street, whether they look left or right or something like that. But I'm not manipulating that, because that just happens. And you're out in the public sphere, essentially. You're not expecting that that's a private sidewalk and that no one can see you. I can probably videotape it, it's not a big deal, right? But what if I change the intersection somehow? So I can test how people cross the street. Now I'm intervening in their world, right? So start dipping into whether, you know, I'm conducting research or not, and then the human part. No dead people across the street, but and we're going to use, study, or analyze the information or biospecimens. So we have to put these two things. If you fall through the first hole, is it research? And then you fall through the second one, is it human? You're doing human subjects research. This is going to be given to everyone. Please don't study it in any depth because you'll probably go blind, but also who wants to read this? But these are hard questions to figure out. It's not like I just rolled out of bed and, you know, I mean, sometimes you know it's definitely human, but sometimes you're really not sure, or it could go both ways. It's a very nuanced understanding, and that's a lot of what we do is try and understand when someone hands us a giant project, what are we getting enough information to either answer these questions? Is it research? Is it human? And so I've made a couple logic trees and definitional explanations so that people can kind of have this information, because when you guys start doing, moving towards your coursework where you might do a research project, you may end up doing research, but it doesn't have to be human research, and it may not come to us, or vice versa. It might actually fit in that criteria, and you're going to end up having to send it to us. Okay. So again, this is just going to be given to you guys, but I just wanted to sort of give you a flow. So when you come to the conclusion, let's say there's one of three options. Yes, if it is research and it's also human research, then you have to submit to the IRB. Why? Because that's our job, that's the policy, that's the requirement, we are the experts on it. Yeah, okay. If you're not sure that your project, or it could go both ways depending on a slight variance of your research, of your study design, or where you're at in your project. Maybe part of your project has nothing to do with research from our point. Maybe it's just a lit review, or you're gonna do something just with de-identified data, but later on in the project, now you're gonna go out and test it with real people or an intervention. You need to talk to us about it. You know, we'll walk you through that. Or just plain up submit to us formally through our system so that we can actually look and have a record of this. And the last one is using all of the reasonable tools, your good best intentions, a full cup of coffee, you're thinking clearly, and you realize everything that we are giving you as tools, the same things we use to think about whether something is a human subject research project or not. And with all that best judgment, you come to the educated conclusion that it's not human subjects research. Guess what? You don't have to submit to us. It saves everybody time, money, effort, heartbreak, you know, delay, everything. But when in doubt, it's like, ask or submit. If you know that it is, submit. If it's not, you don't need to submit. Okay? So it's a process. It's not like you just dump it in, walk away, and then, I mean, obviously, you gotta choose a project. You gotta complete, if you're gonna do human subjects research, you gotta do all these city classes. I don't know if anyone's heard of CITI, but it's a subscription service where we have standardized, validated educational series that helps people really prepare to understand all of the ethical components and other details about research. So we're all working on the same page, you know? Review the submission guide and the documents, develop the documents. Sometimes just putting your protocol together your research project, you realize, I didn't think it was. Now that I'm asking a question or getting asked a question and answering it, I now realize I'm doing a human subjects research project. We're going to have, and we do have protocol templates and consent templates if it's applicable to your project on our webpage. I'm going to give you all these references. And get all this together. Then you actually submit. So then you create an application, it goes into our system. I cannot strongly emphasize this enough. Please check on your own work. If you submit things, like I tell people, if you paid your cable bill, make sure your check cleared, or your e-payment went through. It breaks my heart when I see students and PIs, faculty that think they press submit and then just wait for months, and then they found out they never actually submitted, and they're like in a panic. And we'll try to help you out, but check behind yourself. It will just save everybody. And reach out to us. We're there. We're customer oriented. You have a question about where your project is? Reach out to us. Don't think that you can't show up at our door, call us, email. We will reach out to you if you reach out to us, okay? And then I'm going to say, probably statistically, 1 to 2% of all projects that come to the IRB come in, get approved straight up. Just, hey, thanks, awesome, gold star, go, right? Everybody else, and through lots of reasons, not that you're good or bad at something, just maybe we need more information, or it's a very, very complicated project. The IRB is like, hey, can you clarify some points or fix some things? So it goes back for you to do something, and then you have to submit back to us. Sometimes it happens back and forth a few times. Please make sure that you do those things, and that takes time, right, before you get an outcome. 2 things that you may or may not know, among things you may not know, is that the IRB has 2 components. One is we call like stuff that can be reviewed in the office amongst the staffers. Okay, we're all trained and we can do reviews and things like that. Some things, because of the laws and rules and policies and all and local context, we have to send them to the full committee. That means that in a room once a month with certain appointed members of the IRB, it's very specific membership, again, dictated by the rules and also policies, that we have experts talk about and fully vet these projects, that it's way above an individual person in the office, that it goes to a team of maybe 15 people, and they argue and wrestle, and they have camera out all the details. So that's what we call the full committee. So most projects don't go to the full committee, especially education projects, but they could. So we have projects that are literally done in-house amongst the office staff, and then stuff that has to go to the board, or it might go back and forth between these 2 things. You guys wouldn't know that. All you're doing is waiting for your approval letter. Nobody, I don't care if you're a PhD, super genius, or you're the first-time submitter, nobody can do human subjects research until they get the IRB approval, which means a letter from the IRB that says you can do your project, it is approved. You may have to do other things before you can actually implement your project. You may have to get equipment sent to you. You may have to be able to go to a facility to interview people, or go to a school system, for example. You'd have to get permission from the school system. So just because little old Gabrielle's like, yep, do your project, you can't be like, well, hi school system, I'm here to do my project. They'd be like, what? No, you can't come in here. You have to get a lot of approval. So just the IRB is just one little corner of the world that we said you can do your project, but there might be other processes in place. All these things take time. Okay, so the workflow is you come in, you prepare, you have internal routing, you submit to the IRB, we review, we assign it to, can it even come in, is it a sufficient enough application, we assign it to reviewers, it may or may not go to the board, we send revisions out, they come back, we approve, and oops, I'm missing a word there, approve and release the documents, the approval document, the letter, the consent form with their official stamp on it, things like that. And then this project goes back and forth. It might change over the life cycle of the research, and then eventually it either comes for a continuing review or it closes because it's done. You tell us we're done, right? So these things have a life cycle, and at each point we're working on these things. Okay? So it's not like a one-time thing we'll never see again, most likely. All of these things take time. We're real people doing real projects in real time. So we talk about the time when you submit to the IRB until the time we actually review it. So I was sharing with Sarah that right now we basically have one person in the office who's doing reviews because it's summer, people go on vacation, and we have staff changes, and When I was at Temple for a long time, we got over 1,000 applications, initial applications in a year. And at one point, there were only 2 of us doing reviews. So we had initial applications, continued reviews, modifications, all the submissions that come back and forth because they need modifications, and then like the special letters of determination, reliance agreements, all this other stuff. There's like 2 of us. Yeah. So bear with us when people complain. We are staffing up, we have lots of help and resources, but we're just people in a room working as best as we can, but you realize everyone's project is important. It definitely is. It's just that everybody's important. So we have to spread what we have. We MacGyver things. We work as hard as we can, but it does take time. Then also people get like, well, it took you guys 3 months to approve my project. Well, I looked at your project, it came in, a month later I reviewed it, or 2 weeks, or whatever the time was, and then I sent it back to your revisions, and then you never submitted back to us for 6 weeks. But then they're like, yeah, but you took 2 months. Like, no. It's like when people show up to the doctor's office and they, early. Well, I got here at 8 o'clock for my 10 o'clock appointment. And then 10 o'clock comes, they get seen, they're like, well, I've been waiting here for 2 hours. Well, okay. That wasn't the delay on the care provider side. You just came early. Same thing with the IRB. The faster you get your side done and back to us, the faster you'll get approved, hopefully. Because again, we have to re-review things when they come back, right? So what can you do to minimize delays? I give everyone comfortably, if you have a project due, give yourself as much space as you possibly can. I would love to have same-day turnaround times, but it can take a month. It can take 2 weeks. It can take a day. I don't know, because there's so many variables, but when you're submitting something, make sure that it's the best quality you could possibly get to us, that you've talked to people, you've followed all the rules, the instructions, that use the templates, do everything you possibly can. Ask friends to read it, ask your mentor to read it, go through a committee or whatever point you're at. Tell us that's a student project in the system. Check on your application in the system. Just respond quickly. And if you're struggling, I have had people crying, I just can't do this anymore. I've been trying to do this for 3 weeks. I cannot figure out hit submit. And I'm like, oh my dude, just call me. Stop by. I can help you in a minute. The hardest part of your research project should not be submitting to the IRB. Right? We're here to help you. So help yourself and help us help yourself. I don't know what you need. And also, if everyone's complaining about the same thing, we take that under advisement. We know our system's tough. It's going to go away, but we know it's tough. So, of course, we're sympathetic, So whatever we can do to help each other get through the research process, yay for us. So I'm giving you some resources. So we have stuff on our web page online that you can use. We've got guides under the compliance tab. There's actually one for the IRB. We've got an actual submission step-by-step instruction. It's actually broken down by types, like if initial application, responding modifications, continuing reviews, all these things. So rather than go into all of that, it's like physically up there. It's a guide. You can click on it, walk through it, okay? Ask mentors. There are lots of people who have already submitted to the IRB before. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you know someone who's good at it or you're struggling, talk with somebody. Also, the student investigators, I would say, almost never are ever able to be the principal investigator or primary investigator in our system or in real life. Our system makes you choose somebody who's a faculty member to be the PI, even though you're doing all the work. It's in our system, and instructionally, educationally, you're going to be mentored through the research process. So ultimately, the PI is responsible for everything. I would say when you're the boss, the poop always rolls uphill. So no matter what's going on, it's always your fault. So if your student is struggling, you should be helping your student. So mentorship is important. But also, you got to tell your mentor that you're struggling. Make groups. If you're all going to submit, why not do it together? Talk. Maybe strengthen numbers. And then our staff. Gosh, we're here. We're small but mighty. We are happy to help you. And you may stump us. More power to you. Let us help you help yourself, okay? You can call us, you can drop by. We actually have lunch and learns, I think, on Tuesdays. But you could also just call and make an appointment. I find that in-person conversations are amazing. It connects us together as people. Also, I've been at other institutions, and I'm just out. Drexel is very email heavy. I've never seen so many emails fly back and forth. Does anyone call anyone? I was away for a week and I got one phone call. Hundreds of emails, but I was like, hey, are people just adverse to speaking on the phone? Does this thing work, Call or stop by. You don't, tone and subtleties and, you're spending 30 minutes typing. I'm like, man, we could have had a conversation in 2 minutes. We don't. If you need a record of the conversation, we'll send an email. But I'm very tactile, nice to meet you, let's have coffee, come on, And our office right now, and should be for a while, is in the Bellick building. Do you guys know where that is? It's on I call it the hospital, what's it, University Center City campus, whatever. I'm new to Drexel, so I'm only here for a few months, where I am. On race, 1505 race. So we're there, like I said. Or if you really need somebody, like I'm here today, shoot, I'd sit with you, talk with you. Okay. I'll make a special trip, or we can send someone out, like for a group. Sure, awesome. You can call too. So, documents again on our IRB webpage. We have templates, so you don't have to figure out like how am I going to do research. Just use the template for the protocol. It actually tells you all the things you need to think about in order to do your research. Okay. We have application forms, all the things you need on the webpage. Okay, but having said all that, our IRB is under construction. So I'm new to Drexel. One of the reasons why is we're just basically going to start fresh. So I'm introducing, it's like, hey, I don't want to show you too much because I'm changing everything. So I'm new. Our board membership is kind of changing. We're having all new guidance documents, SOPs, worksheets, templates, anything that you guys need to do your job, we also basically need to do them. We're creating them so you can use them. We also follow all the same rules, and those rules should not be hidden to people. I can't be like, why didn't you do that really rare thing that it's fundamental for me approving your study? Hey, but I didn't tell you about it. I made you guess, or I kept going back and forth with would never provide the information. Why would you do that? Don't we want to get through this process together? So one of my goals is change the website, change our processes, change our procedures. We're actually changing, hopefully soon, our entire computer system that manages IRB functions and research functions. COES is our current system. It's very, I call it hospice care. It's a system that was invented or developed at MIT in 2005, which in computer world time is just awful. It's very, very user-friendly. It's missing all kinds of things that we physically in our office need to do our job, and it's not going on well. So we're getting a new system. It's a system I'm actually familiar with, and it's pretty cool. I feel that research applications to IRB should be like buying shoes online. It should be very intuitive. You should be able to see what you're shopping for. You should have all the tools, and you just hit submit, and you can watch the process. And that's sort of that intuitive flow for the work and in just gathering the information. That's something that the computer software system we're going to implement is capable of doing. And we have new staff. So I'm very customer service oriented. I am very, I love my job. I love what I do. Everything I do is across of medicine, law, rule, customer service, research. It's just fascinating. So I want that to be infectious. I want people to feel excited about doing research, not like, oh, I have to go do a project, I have to submit to the IRB. I don't want that to be the experience. I want you guys to feel empowered. Wow, I did something. I did original scholarly activities, and I went through the IRB. I hope you all go through the first time and get approved. It's like gold star. But if you don't, hey. So without putting a whole bunch of detail up, just know that we're going to be changing. We'll be making announcements about the changes, but the changes are hopefully for the better. It's going to make it so that you have all the same background information that we do to use the reviews is available to you. So when you're making your research projects, keep those things in mind. For example, the definitions of human subject research. Those should not be hidden. And I should ask you the right questions so I know and help you to know whether you're doing human subject research. There are special worksheets that we have to follow when you're doing research with children about whether you need to get consent from the parents or not. Something called FERPA, which is kind of a cool band name, but it's really federal protections related to research records. So that do you have to tell people or when you're accessing their educational records? And if so, what do you have to tell them, and how do you have to tell them, and when do you have to tell them? Again, this is public, information. So I'm not going to make you guess. And if I know you're doing a research project that involves children, and it also involves educational records, why not give people that FERPA worksheet that we use ourselves to make sure that we're compliant? You're going to have that, so you have the right tools. Again, make your application better, faster turnaround time, easier review for us, and that's where we're heading. Okay, a lot of information. It's both overwhelming and only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of all the things that we do. But I'm talking at you, people on the internet world, but I would really love questions or comments. So, opening the floor.
I think first, I know Sarah has the deadlines for our processes for students who are going to submit, so if you want to just say a little bit about that.
Sure. So the school decided to help students make it easier on them as to whether or not they actually have to submit to the IRB. So that is why we opened up the fall truck survey this week, that you'll need to go and complete that with your advisor. I provided a PDF of the form as well so that you can have an in-person conversation with your advisor. So if you know what your project is, we're requesting you to complete the survey for a summer review by July 26th. If you're not ready yet, then the fall review deadline would be September 25th to actually complete that fall truck survey. We're going to have an internal committee of faculty who are who do human subjects research on a daily basis to actually review each one of these surveys. And they will make the determination of whether or not it would be considered human subjects research. Now, sometimes in the past with the survey, if you do not provide us enough information, we sometimes get gray areas as well. So if we are in doubt that it could possibly also be human subjects research, you will be submitting to IRB. So our goal is for summer deadline to have emails sent out to students by August 9th to let you know whether or not you need to submit to IRB. If you have a fall deadline, we're going to send out your email by September 27th so that you can have your determination of whether or not your project needs to go to IRB within the first couple weeks of the fall term. And then what we will be providing is we will work with Gabrielle's office to have a COIAS training. So if you do have to submit an application, we will train you on the system of how you actually submit it. So we're only going to provide that training if you actually have to submit to IRB. And we'll be doing that in October for the fall. It would be October 4th for the fall. We're actually going to do an August 23rd training as well for the summer review time. We also know that just because you get training, you still may not be able to submit. So we're going to do just like we did last year for students. I will be available, as well as I've had people from Gabrielle's office be available, that we will sit here on campus for you for a particular day, either September 10th or October 10th, that you can come into the room with us, we can sit there with your computer, and we can help you actually upload everything into this system, and you can press the submit button, and we can verify to you that you actually submitted it, so that it can get both your approval, but your PI needs to, your faculty advisor needs to actually approve your record to in COIAS before it actually goes to IRB. So it's a two-step process. If your faculty mentor actually doesn't hit their approve button, IRB doesn't get it. So we will help you with how to see how to actually click the button so that your advisor then can know how to click the button. You may have to talk with them directly in order to do that. We're asking for all of your protocols to be submitted in COIAS to IRB by October 11th. That way it gives IRB almost 2.5 months through the fall term to be able to review your protocol. So our goal is that all of our human subjects research projects are reviewed and approved by the beginning of spring term. That way it gives you ample time to actually work on your project. If you're able to finish a project and submit before October 11th, you can submit as early as you want to. That is the maximum deadline date for us to say that we're giving IRB ample time to review on their side. Now that also doesn't mean the time of the back and forth. We were giving the 2.5 months for IRB to have it in their queue because it's not just your projects, it's everybody's projects on campus. There are other schools that also have student projects as well during the fall and spring terms. So everybody goes into the same queue and IRB has to review all of them that go in there. So we're trying to have you submit earlier to give ample time for them to do their initial review. And then you can follow up with your faculty advisor on how to do the responses so that you can get your approval letter as soon as possible.
So I would just like to tag team on that a little bit. So I'm hoping that we have this new system, and so we're all going to get training as well. But I'm also going to offer to your school and every school, if you have clusters of people submitting at the same time, which is great, one room, everyone's sitting at their computers, I will make sure that we have someone from the IRB there to answer questions in real time. Because if something's funky, you're gonna get stuck. So remind me after you get closer so that I can staff that appropriately, so that we're not stuck, or if there's we can fix it, or whatever. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that we are aware of these batch kind of submissions that we can scale up or down, shift priorities to getting things through. So the goal, of course, that you're saying, high quality submissions that have been really vetted before we ever got them, and then in and out as fast as can. So you want to spend more time doing your project than you do submitting. It's just not how things are supposed to work. So.
And if you have to do an IRB application, it's also best to provide information for them in a clear, concise way, because they don't know your project like you know your project. So if you can explain it in a way for somebody who's never seen it before to understand what you're actually trying to do, it will help with their review as well.
It's so true, and I have PhDs and other folks from MDs who are like, well, this is a very complicated project. No, you're explaining it in a complicated way. There's complicated projects, yes, but if you're also layering complicated explanation. We're not mind readers, we all have different backgrounds scientifically or experientially, but you shouldn't have to be a mind reader. So language is very, very key. Like I said, hopefully by then, one of the things just as a heads up, I'm integrating is smart forms so that you answer questions that are very specific, and then if you answer a certain question, it's going to lead you to another question. So I don't need your life story in a 37-page paper of it just when 2 questions would suffice. Yes, no, this, that, we're trying to pare down that process. And again, we live in a world of intelligent, interaction. So the smart forms are one of the things I'm going to be rolling out for these key regulatory and template kind of experiences that people do not have to type a lot, where they can just choose to click on something. So we're going to be a very smooth, awesome, I'm just going positive here, process and experience for everybody. That is really the goal. Just gotta all trust and believe and buy into it. And it will go well. So you guys will be the first wave of the new. You're setting the bar high. But that's a compliment. I believe we can do it. So again, I'm Gabrielle. I am the director, but you know where to find me. You're going to have access to this PowerPoint. Please know there's a staff, there's an office, there's a place, and we want to hear from you. Okay? Thank you so much for your time.